Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Boomi, Patricia Bradley Moore.
Good afternoon. We are back to back. I know we were supposed to have a break, so I'm just going to take a few seconds. If everyone can just close your eyes with me for a few seconds. Just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. One more time. Deep breath in and a deep breath out. I think this is very important for us. It's going to help us. That meditation is just going to help us be here and be present in this room, because I know there's a lot of information that's coming at you today. And this last panel, I am so excited to announce. So my name is Patricia Bradley Moore. I am a solution strategist for Boomi. If you are not familiar with our organization, please do come see us at the table. We are an integration and automation platform that helps you connect your applications, your data, and your people for accelerated outcomes. And specific to the things we're talking about today, we are so excited to help our customers get their information AI ready and accelerate their AI outcomes. So I serve on the Boomi Innovation Group team alongside Mike Bachman, who you've heard speak a few times, and he's about to come back up here to do this panel, as well as Chris Capetta, who put together the technology that you saw for that conversation with Claude. So whether you are excited or terrified from that last keynote, I think that this panel is going to be very exhilarating for all of us to sort of think about AI good versus evil. There's so much that's happening, and I think it's important for us to think about both sides of the coin. And I do hope that that keynote with Claude sort of helped you see that there are a lot of regulation and limitations being put in place with the technologies that are at the forefront of this discussion right now. But from this, you'll sort of get almost like a recap of some of the things that we've talked about today. I know this panel is going to focus a bit on not just what we were just talking about, practical AI and how it impacts our everyday, but also thinking about the long-term impacts, thinking about the future of work, and then thinking about that regulation and governance piece. So please put your hands together and welcome our last panel of the day, AI, good versus evil.
Thank you, Patricia. All right, and thanks, everybody. I know we've had a lot that we've covered today, and panelists, come on in, and I will introduce you and allow you to introduce yourselves to the rest of the world. Yes, the lights are bright, and this is part 2 of AI, good versus evil. On the stage with me, I'm going to go rapid fire down. So I'm going to introduce you, and then you could tell everybody what you do. How about that? All right, Sneha Shah.
I am the head of new business at head of new business ventures at SEI.
Great. Dr. Matthew Stamm.
Hi, I'm Matt Stamm. I'm an associate professor at Drexel University, and I run the Multimedia and Information Security Lab.
And Carolyn Yap. And let's see. All right, we got it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Yap, and I'm the managing director of our global AI business at Google Cloud.
All right. Last year, Caroline anchored the panel as well and gave some pretty great answers, I thought, right down the middle of the good versus evil panel. And just in the same form we had last year, we have similar personas on stage. We have an economist, we have an academic, and we have somebody in industry dealing with AI on a day-to-day basis out to the rest of the world. And so this is a great cross-section of folks who are going to talk about AI good versus evil. So Sneha, I want to get your insight really quickly, and I think we should just, well, let's start. Is AI good or evil?
It's both, just like us. And I know that sounds like an easy answer, but it's really true. It's got this potential for transformative change. I'm from Kenya, and growing up in Africa and being exposed to so many existential things, you know, lack of education, poverty, disease, etc. If you look at the potential for AI to be transformative as a force for good, on those, it's amazing. And on the other end of that, you've got this sort of, we're going to be fighting wars over semiconductors, right? Like, and where those are made. And, you know, unsupervised AI left to its own devices might decide that humanity's, what it really needs is something other than human beings. And so, like, you know, we might be in this really strange place where both good and evil, which is something that's in all of us, now exists in an intelligence that's outside of us. And so I think the conversation that you had with Claude was a really minds. I was like, that's interesting. And so I think it can be both, and we just have to accept it.
Matt, what do you think?
I think AI isn't good or evil inherently. I think it's just a tool that amplifies the behaviors of the people who use it. So if you can use it for good, you can use it for evil, but it's somewhat neutral. What we're seeing, though, is an explosion in capabilities, and people are able to use it for both good and evil purposes that they previously weren't able to.
And Caroline.
Exactly what Matt said. I completely agree. It is a tool, just like a car. You can use it for good or you can use it for bad. It is literally down to the operator. But I will say something, though.
Yep.
I'm so happy to actually see that you have 2 women from the Global South on this panel, which is such a rare thing to see. So, because I grew up in Malaysia.
Yeah.
We have Sneha from Kenya, so thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is what the team made up of at PACT. We're trying to get the ideas and viewpoints from as many diverse sources of humans we possibly can. So thank you for being on the panel, both of you. And Matt, you too. All right. So that said, let's dive into some ethical implications. Now, yes, we did have a conversation with generative AI earlier today, and we might revisit her just after this panel. But all right, couple questions. Considering the rapid advancements of AI technologies, what kind of ethical dilemmas, speaking of which, do you foresee, Caroline, becoming more prominent in the next decade?
I think the access to this tool is probably going to be the biggest issue. Like I see that as the underlying theme, right? It's always been about, even with smartphones, who had access first, who could use it first, which then ended up dictating the way some of the new apps and new tools and things and systems were designed. I think if we can figure out how to delete a bit of that divide with the rest of the world population who should also be able to have access to these tools, it should solve a lot of the other ethical issues that we have around AI.
So this is an accessibility issue. So Sneha, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think accessibility is one of the barriers to ethical considerations?
Yeah, absolutely, because these things are going to cost, like getting access to GPUs. We heard about a stat at the beginning of what it takes a startup to be able to access this, and we know that technology gets cheaper over time to use, but we also know that the advantage is going to go to the people who move first in these spaces. And so I do think accessibility is a real issue. The other thing I'll say is that, we talked about AI not being good or evil but based on the people. The people are programming things, right, and adding data in that's then creating bias. And so for me, bias is a big issue. I have a friend who asked recently for a picture generated of a payments conference, and everyone was male at the payments conference. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I looked around, and actually there was a VC that I will remain unnamed, but I was looking at their partner picture, and it was all male and all very homogenous. And I was like, I wonder where the AI is learning that from. And so I do think that there's this problem of access, and then there's a problem of really inherent bias in the models.
Yeah, and Matt, do you feel the same way? Access, bias?
Access is absolutely, I think, one of the biggest issues. AI is a tremendous force multiplier, and we'll see people who are able to access it and use it get tremendous advantages in the marketplace in many areas. People who aren't able to access it and aren't able to access it early will inherently be at a disadvantage, and this will amplify economic divides, the ability to influence government, the law, all sorts of things like that. I also think one of the other major ethical issues that we will see is somewhat related to what I work in. So I develop tools to detect synthetic images and videos, deep fakes, things like that. I think on a whole, the ability to create AI-generated media and AI-manipulated media is a tremendous good. It allows people to engage in a lot of creative endeavors that you weren't able to before. But the other side of that is you can use it for misinformation, disinformation, and influence campaigns. We've always had tools like this, but we were not able to scale it like this. Before, it took tremendous financial resources, tremendous amounts of skill, and now this can be in the hands of any individual or a criminal organization or very well-resourced state actors. Understanding how how this stuff can be misused and how we can combat that, and how we intentionally build generative AI systems is one of the important major ethical issues that we face right now.
Please.
Just to add to that, I don't know if people realize how many democratic elections are being held this year in the world. 49% of the world's population is going to be subject to the results of an election this year. And this is the year that all of this manipulated media is hitting. And so I'm just really scared and curious about what's going to happen.
Yeah, and maybe to add on to that one little bit, we've seen generative AI and manipulated media show up in multiple elections, but this past year, the DeSantis presidential campaign used AI-generated images of Donald Trump and Anthony Fauci in campaign ads. This is, to the best of anyone's knowledge, the first use of a major American presidential candidate using AI-generated media in a way that is not immediately obvious to the information consumer. This is a tremendously important event and will influence not only American elections, but elections around the world. We need to be thinking about how to deal with this now.
Well, and since you're one of the world's experts on the matter, have to pull that thread. How do we detect whether something's real or fake?
So my lab actually was able to detect that. We got a bit of press coverage about that. There's a number of tools that look for traces left by AI-generated media. That's the approach that my lab works in. So when you create a deep fake video, a synthetic image, or something like Sora videos, this comes out of a very different processing pipeline than what comes out of a camera. And this leaves behind statistical traces that our eyes can't see, but they're kind of like fingerprints. If someone were to break into your house, try to steal your TV, they'd touch things and leave behind fingerprints. Generative AI technologies leave these behind too. We can develop tools that can look for these fingerprints and let us know if something was created by an AI tool or manipulated. There are some other approaches as well that have pros and cons, where people are trying to build in invisible watermarks into these AI generators that'll let you know that something came out of generative AI technology. My personal opinion is that's an imperfect solution, but certainly a really good thing to do, because while there's ways around that, it does make it a little bit harder for malicious actors to get away with it.
Yeah, and Caroline, at Google, the amount of resources that you have internally in the different departments, that all touches on this. How is Google kind of thinking about, in general, maybe all the other hyperscalers, or if you just want to comment yourself and leave Google out of it, where do you think that the state of the art is in these larger hyperscalers to provide these kind of pipelines to look for deep fakes, to look for pipelines with maybe nefarious data coming into them?
So I will talk about what we did on the Google Health side. We, about a month ago, actually no, yeah, it was a month ago, we launched, from a healthcare perspective, a framework that allowed people to actually test models for bias. And so I'm focusing on that because that kind of bias in a healthcare setting is really important. It ends up with nefarious outcomes, even if it's not necessarily used by a bad actor. And what the framework allowed was, in the case that I'm going to talk about, it was a dermatology case. The model could be tested and found that there was no bias across all age groups, skin tones, races, etc., for cancerous conditions. But at the non-cancerous conditions, like eczema, something like that, they found that for black communities at age 70 plus, it was not detecting it, right? Isn't that funny, right? Cancerous conditions equal,
Not detected.
But for something that was not cancerous, it wasn't able to pick it up just for that demographic. But that framework allowed people to start to use and test and see and get the results so that then they could apply it to avoid some of that bias. So at least from our side, on the research perspective, we are looking at things like that to be able to help avoid some of those biases. And then from a personal opinion perspective, I think that more does need to be done to deal with things from a cyber kind of situation. But that's where I think AI can also be that tool to help expedite some of these developments, even in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, and I really like the thought, first of all, for systems that are going to detect, you know, fakes, deep fakes, all of those sort of things, and then also bias removal. And I'm thinking bias in finance is also something that we need to think about too. Sneha, what are ways that, what are areas that you're kind of worried about, you're thinking about, and you're having your teams focus on internally?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the financial world, a lot of the time we're thinking about personalization and access as the best uses of AI. So like we're allowing more people to access the services that the wealthy get to access is one. So, you know, financial advice, and then also personalizing that advice to the next generation. And so some really interesting trends that are happening in the world that sort of this data is like stuck in my head. I just heard a couple of weeks ago was that in the next 6 years, 70% of the inherited wealth that's transferring is going to transfer to women. And 60% of women fire their husband's financial advisor after inheriting wealth. And so if you think about those two trends coming together, all right, like if I were a financial advisor right now, I'd be very worried about like, am I creating personalized experiences that work for women? And so actually that's where AI could be really helpful, is to create more personalized experiences. But if you think about who's feeding the models today, do you think there are many that like actually would know what women are looking for in terms of like, you know, wealth? And so I think that's the piece that I started thinking about. How do you start feeding these models? How do you start providing access to the data, to the communities, to the people that will help feed that, so that we can actually solve these issues and help our clients get to the next level as disruption happens in the industry?
Yeah, Caroline.
And by the way, it is women who actually drive household spend, even in the United States. If we just look at the US demographic alone, right, women are the primary ones who decide household spend, not men, even if they're not working.
So if we were to give, you know, proper agency to everybody, truly democratize the technology so that everybody could use it, that alone creates a sea change in our economy. That's what I heard anyway. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. The more people have access and can help, you know, learn, train, and it's the same thing that we were talking about earlier about practical applications of AI, where we said you should give it to everyone in your company so you can sort of learn from the diverse experiences of everyone in the company, and you can learn the best applications and the best use cases with guardrails. It's the same thing. When we apply it to the broader world, whether it's healthcare or financial services, the more people that have access, the better the models will be.
Yeah.
A great example is Kiva, right, the microloans company. And you know, people like us could also help provide microloans. It actually lifted a lot of small communities, largely artisanal work by women, and those villages and ended up starting to get, you know, better quality of life, because the men would always go out to do more industrial work, but the women were doing more of the things that, you know, crafts and stuff that other people want to buy. So it's really fascinating when you actually look at these sort of studies.
Well, okay, let's just pull on that thread for a second. So, all right, we've got microloans going out to women, you know, communities all over the globe. How is AI going to affect that going forward? Tell me, does that even play?
I think it absolutely does, and if anything, it should make it easier for more people to get it, because there's enough data now from something like Kiva. If you look back at how they started and where it's been going and how well they've been even getting repaid and all of that, they can take that data and now start to actually offer other services. And assuming the digital divide and the devices divide is taken care of, more people can actually start to do that kind of work. It actually changes the way people work, male or female, in a lot of communities that are not part of the connected world today.
Just to maybe build on that, I look at what goes on in my own lab. My own lab, my research lab is made up of students. None of them are American citizens. The primary output we make is like code, research like software, and then academic papers, which is really challenging when you're not a native speaker and you're not trained in this. Simple tools, well, not simple, but broadly accessible tools, things like ChatGPT, gives them a tremendous advantage because they can create their ideas and use something like that to fix their English. If you're part of a community that doesn't speak English or many other languages. Using some of these AI tools, now you have the ability to communicate with people all across the world. You may not know how to build a website, but a lot of these multimodal LLMs can help you put that together. It gives you access to skills or other skilled people that you normally wouldn't have access to, and now you have the opportunity to engage in commerce, thought distribution, thought exchange with people all over the world.
That's amazing. Sneha, it looked like you had some thoughts too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I forget, one of your earlier panelists said that the AI isn't sort of a state-regulated thing, right? It crosses borders. It crosses national borders, too. And so the more we can kind of bring in, like, the rest of the world into the thinking, the more we're actually going to build things that really work. Because like, state actors are going to want to think defense first. And so they're going to create things that are only helpful for their national sort of entities and their people, whereas actually some of the benefits of this technology is going to be global. And so the more we can just empower people to think globally and act globally and communities to come together, the better it's going to be for everyone.
So, oh yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
I also think that for AI to really create a bigger sea change as a whole for the next 15 years, public and private partnerships are really important.
Go on. What do you
Right.
mean by that?
So deleting the divide is a great example. If you really want to empower your citizens and your communities, that requires NGOs and also just federal governments as a whole to be part of the change, because it requires some education, it requires some upskilling, it requires there's all of these things. Even something as simple as, say, farming, right? If you want to teach soil testing to a farmer, you need to equip them with the tools to test the soil, to know how to read what the data is on, even if it's on a mobile phone, to decide what fertilizer mix they need to get better yield, right? But you can't do any of those just as one company, whether it's big tech or otherwise. It does need that, like Sneha was saying, there's regulation and there's all of those things. The public-private partnerships will really help with this sort of a push to really lift economies as a whole.
And I don't think that's new. Like, we've been dealing with public-private partnerships for all the big things that are happening in our industry. And so in financial services, when KYC and digital identity came up, right, like every single actor
Tell
was
the
not
folks
able.
what KYC means.
Oh,
I'm
sorry, know your customer. And so when sort of people started to think about, are the people that I'm banking actually terrorists? Are they human traffickers? How do I make sure the money's not being used for nefarious purposes? The banks themselves couldn't solve the problem. The data companies, of which I was one, couldn't solve the problem by themselves. Governments couldn't solve the problem. And so we came together and we created these financial crime coalitions where we actually talked about how do we fight the bad actors by cooperating. And that really did work in that industry at the time. And I think it's the same thing with AI. The more we start collaborating with regulators and private actors and NGOs and citizens, I think the more we'll actually get to the right answers. But things like PACT are actually really important for that reason too, because none of us know where it's going. And so the more we can just say, I'm uncertain, I don't know how to write contracts anymore, right, to protect, what sort of data should I be protecting? I don't know how to clean my data. I don't know what it means to think about bias. And sort of the more vulnerable we are able to be in these conversations and work with each other, the faster we're all going to get to go.
So I want to switch gears just real fast. This is a good versus evil panel, and we've said on the stage, this technology is maybe an extension of our humanness, right? And so that could determine if AI is good or evil in the actions that come from that, with some variance. Anyway, something I was talking about with a bunch of people probably a few weeks ago was the amount of information about, we've got these elections coming up. We don't know a lot about the candidates. We don't know a lot about different initiatives, laws being passed, voted on, all of that sort of thing. But AI has a way to incorporate, synthesize, summarize, and essentially advise the human on what's going on in the real world. If we were to have agency or an extension of our agency by using the AI as a way to interact with government policy, with our legislators, and maybe their AIs as well, what do you think about that as an idea? If we're thinking about AI as good or evil, can we have a direct democracy with an AI substitute for ourselves, helping us make policy. I'm going to point to you, Matt, and see what you think of that idea.
I think, when I think about things like this, I think that the possibility, like the upper bound, the thing that we could achieve is wonderful and amazing. But the security researcher in me is terrified of things like that. When I think of opportunities like that, one of the things you're seeing is maybe an opportunity to summarize information broadly and autonomously collected, or an opportunity to ingest large amounts of information if you're a politician to try to sense what's happening out there in the world. This speaks to, I think, a very modern information security problem that we don't really have a good lens at looking at. And specifically, in the past, when we looked at communication, like if I'm a politician, I get information, if I get a letter from a voter, you know a human wrote that, a real person created that. If you go out and try to get information, maybe 30 years ago, it came through a few official channels, your local newspaper, a community organization that you know and has a good reputation, a couple TV channels, where there are major reputational harms for if they spread incorrect or false information. Currently, what we have now is an environment where anybody can create information, manipulate it, and distribute it throughout the world. And our existing approaches for information security cannot handle that. Mm-hmm. We're really good at saying, how do I prevent a malicious actor from getting access to something on my computer? Like, don't break my security, like, don't get into my files, right? Crypto's the solution. But we don't have good solutions to what I think is the 21st century information security problem. What do we do about information that we don't know the source of, or we inherently can't trust it? Crypto can't save us, and you can have misinformation or information flooding events that can completely undermine the good in opportunities like that.
Sneha?
And just to add, I worked for Reuters for many years, and one of the things I loved about Reuters was we had to have 3 independent sources before we reported on anything. And so, you had to verify it. And so Reuters for many years, and even today, I think it's still judged as one of the more independent media. To your point, social media, the algorithms push the things that are going to get the most attention and the most emotion. They're not pushing the things that are the most accurate. And so when you're in a heightened emotion situation, whether it's war, like a crisis event, political event, and someone's pushing the stuff that's going to drive the most emotion, and no one's checking for accuracy, that's just a recipe for disaster. And I don't think that's a future state. I think that's where we are now, right? And we've seen it with everything that's sort of out there, not just on TikTok or Instagram, but Facebook too. And everyone talks about Gen Z as if they're the ones that are getting duped by this. It's actually not. It's my parents' generation that is the most duped by this. The kids are actually cool. Like, the kids know how to distinguish what's good and what isn't. It's the older folks that are going to have a problem.
All right, we're going to do a quick lightning round, and 1-word, maybe 2-word answers at most. So, first question, Caroline, we're going to start with you. Is AI sentient right now?
No.
Matt?
No.
No, but.
No, but. Okay, no, but. I said 2 things. All right, great. We've got just one more lightning round question. All right. We're going to just do this one more time for the audience. AI, good versus evil. Is it good, evil, or somewhere in between, or neither?
Overall good.
Overall good.
Neither.
Okay, Caroline?
Neither. Is down to humans.
All right, and last question is, what is one thing you let me back up. AGI. If you believe that's a thing, say it. And then say what year. I want predictions. Caroline.
It is a thing, but to be fully like us, where it can also do all the things when we drive, do all the things when we cook, do all the things as a whole.
Lightning round.
I'm saying 2045.
2045. Okay, great. Matt?
I think a long, long time. I don't think we have the mathematical frameworks to capture human thought yet.
Okay. Sneha?
I think as we would recognize it as AGI, 20 years.
20 years. All right. Great. Now we're going to open it up to the rest of you. questions from the audience. All right, if anybody has a question, the house lights are coming up. So let's ask our panelists. We have a question over here. Did you break my system earlier? Because you know what? I'm coming back to you. She's fixed.
Yeah, what do you think about, you were talking about bad actors and people doing bad things with AI. What about people hacking AI? I mean, what if a hack went out and half the self-driving vehicles made a sudden turn to the left? I mean, AI can be hacked just like any software.
Who would you like to answer that?
Whoever would have an answer.
All right, Sneha, do you want to start?
I think that's why this idea of a qualified person is really important as we think about enterprise scale AI or government scale AI, making sure we're really clear about the responsible person who's responsible for the models, how we're thinking about it, and you know, this idea of supervised versus unsupervised AI is really important. I don't think we know the answer. I think we are probably going to see something. I don't know if it'll be a car. I think we'll see an incident happen, and we'll have to learn how to work around it.
Caroline?
There's already software in your car now, even if it's not AI software. So somebody who was writing the chip that goes into the ECM, that, you know, the car unit that actually helps you start the engine and everything, if they wanted to put malicious code in there, they could already do it today. So I don't think it's an AI problem. I think it's just how are you actually doing best software practices? Those things don't disappear with AI. You actually need more of that now, and you definitely need more qualified humans in the loop, to Sneha's point.
Matt?
One, to amplify what Caroline just said, that particular hack has already existed for like 10 to 15 years. Somebody from my former PhD research group, who's a professor at Rutgers, demonstrated you could do that using an exploit and I think a Bluetooth tire pressure. Now, the broader set of AI security vulnerabilities, they are often very, very different than existing cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and we need a wholesale reimagining about how we approach security in the face of AI. We tend to think about it in terms of crypto or existing security approaches. If we do not rethink and modernize our approaches to AI security and things like social engineering, we will see some very major negative consequences.
Yeah, and I think the left turn thing, they call that NASCAR. Anyway, all right. Any more questions in the audience? Any questions that are on your mind for these panelists? You have three amazing experts up here. Yes, right there. Thank you, Krista.
My question's just more outside of just the technical aspect of AI. So when it comes to the main focus on accessibility, you know, for every person on the planet to have access requires a lot of energy. So if you're in a position where to bridge that gap, you have to burn more coal, oil, and nat gas to get there. You know, if I'm in the developing world and I have AI and I can learn how to speak English better, but if I'm 2 feet underwater, you know, how do you square that circle on being able to kind of live your life in that, you know, in that bridge or in that scenario?
Great question. We got a minute to answer this question. Sneha?
I have a perspective on that because I think when we, in our mind frame, when we think about the poorest parts of the world, we think that they're going to go through the same path that the developing world went through to get to the answer. Actually, you'll be shocked at how many places in Africa already run on solar because they started from nothing. And I actually think the same thing is going to apply to how emerging markets think about AI. I don't think they're necessarily going to go to traditional sources of power. I think they're going to be a lot more creative. I loved the startup Martian today. Just thinking about actually how do you be a lot more efficient in your queries. I think we're going to come up with solutions that we haven't even thought of yet around efficiency and scale that work for emerging markets.
Caroline, 10 seconds.
China skipped the laptop phase and went straight to mobile devices. So they didn't waste a lot of laptops and chips and hardware and things like that, right? So they just went straight to mobile devices. And so I think there are a lot of lessons that are being learned now that large language models are not the only be-all, end-all. In fact, there need to be smaller language models and task-specific models that will still give you the right answers. So your training and inference can be done even on a mobile phone. So there's a lot less of that super heavy powered chip stuff that you might be thinking about for a lot of these emerging markets to actually use AI.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time. Panelists, thank you very much. We have to wrap this right now. Sneha, Matt, Caroline, thank you very much for being up here. Please give them a round of applause.